Well, hello, Bill. It's our last recording before Christmas.
Yes, it's certainly that.
We'll be off until January 11th. So today you want to tell us about something clever the Federal Reserve Board just did. We're both going to take a quick look at that Vanity Fair article, part one, about the chief of staff and speculate on what it had to do with you can call it a speech that Trump gave in our time, where we're recording now, on Thursday. Then I want to talk about the implications of Bari Weiss being put in charge of the news at CBS as part of my continuing saga of bored billionaires buying media. And then you wanted to say a few words about the content of the talk itself. I, of course, am shocked that there would be such a word as content, but okay.
Well, I do believe lies are content.
It's true. Lying liar content. Well, tell us what the Federal Reserve Board did.
Proving once again that the members of the Trump administration are not the smartest persons in the room. The Federal Reserve Board, which is made up of the 7 Federal Reserve Board governors who are appointed to 14-year terms, unanimously reappointed the presidents and vice presidents of all 12 regional reserve banks to 5-year terms. In an act widely perceived in the financial markets as protecting the Fed's independence, especially from the clown at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the Federal Open Market Committee that decides interest rates, and this is the important part, is made up of the 7 board governors plus the New York Federal Reserve Bank president and 4 other Reserve Bank presidents on a rotating basis. The chairs they sit on do not actually rotate, they are stationary. This will stop the president from further interfering or appointing more than his last lunatic Federal Reserve member, the new chair of the Federal Reserve. Currently, a fake vetting process is underway for that appointment, which is to be announced by the end of the year. Board Chair Jerome Powell steps down on May 15, 2026, though his term on the Federal Reserve Board itself does not end until January 2028, though there are questions as to whether he will stay on the board. This means the membership of the board and the bank presidents will not change beyond the new chair from its current composition for the rest of Trump's term, unless there are resignations or removals. There will be tremendous pressure for none of these individuals to resign from the financial community. As mentioned in our last podcast, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed that the list of candidates to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has been winnowed down to 5. CBS reported that the finalists are current Fed governors Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman, which would not change the composition of the current board. Also in the running are National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, who we talked about last time, and he is thought to be the front runner, and there's no reason to think that anyone other than him is going to get the position. But they're also in the 5 our former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh and BlackRock executive Rick Ryder, which should scare the shit out of everyone. Everybody's portfolio has something from BlackRock, including the mob. I mean, this is a firm that is indicted more regularly than Trump.
No.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
This is a huge investment firm, and sometimes the Western states sue them for being pro-environmental and stuff. They do everything. In any case, this is not the kind of person that the banking community really wants on the Federal Reserve Board.
Well, okay, so I would call that a clever move. What would you call that?
More than a clever move, it will make sure that Trump does not destabilize and politicize the Federal Reserve Board to the point where it creates chaos and bends to his will. That's just not going to happen now.
Oh, so we can breathe a sigh of relief.
That doesn't mean there won't be a lot of performance, and he may have them indicted for parking or something like that in an effort to remove them. All kinds of silliness could go on. But it should not affect the voting of the members of the open market committee.
Yeah, I would say he's kind of shot his wad in that direction. But
Well,
but
if he were,
you never know with him.
I was going to say, if he was smart, he'd just drop this. But being as whatever he may be, smart doesn't come up on the list.
That's true.
So I'm sure there'll be more shenanigans, which will mean I will spend more time looking at the Fed.
Understood. Okay, so shall we take a quick look at that Vanity Fair article?
Oh, yeah.
Today, we thought we'd talk about what the press has been calling the bombshell interview with Donald Trump's chief of staff. Now, I went looking for the Vanity Fair magazine. It wasn't available at our local Barnes & Noble, and they didn't know when or if it ever would be. So I did something I never thought I'd do, which is subscribe to the online Vanity Fair.
I can hear the cheering from Vanity Fair from here.
Yeah, they're so excited. So I thought we would talk for a moment about the story I think the press missed. I think they buried the lead in their look for juicy little tidbits.
Yeah.
About, what she said about Vance or what she said about whatever. How the author of this wonderful piece actually framed the story. He is an expert in chiefs of staff. He's written about them for many years in his career and got quite a few hours of interviews with her.
11.
Yeah, so Chris Whipple is a good interviewer, and he's reliable. But he wanted to point out that one of the functions, typically, of a chief of staff, and he's written about many of them, is that it is their job to put up what is usually called guardrails around the president to advise them when things are illegal or won't work or are politically suicidal, but that is not how she envisions her job. She envisions her job as enabling Donald Trump to do what he wants to do, even if he disagrees, which is what makes this article so sickening. Because very often she says, I didn't think he should have done it, but he did it. Anyhow, I think the story that he's telling, that, if you read between the lines, is that her father, Pat Summerall, was famous. He did magic things for the Giants, and then he became what was called the voice of the NFL. And he was an absent father, and he was an alcoholic. And so I think that she is an enabler in the truest sense of the word. She says in the article, alcoholism does bad things to relationships, and so it was with my dad and me. So that's Susie Wiles commenting on her efforts with her mother to stage interventions to get her father into treatment. And then she goes on to say what the press has quoted. Some clinical psychologist that knows 1 million times more than I do will dispute what I'm going to say. But high-functioning alcoholics, or alcoholics in general, their personalities are exaggerated when they drink. And so I'm a little bit of an expert on big personalities. Wiles says Trump has an alcoholic's personality. He operates with a view that there's nothing he can't do. Nothing, zero, nothing. And she sees her job as making it possible for him to act upon this alcoholic-like grandiosity. And admittedly, she's had a lot of practice with it. I think it's a deeply disturbing through point in these interviews about why she lets go on what goes on.
Among the disparaging comments that got the attention of the media, she does express genuine concern about Trump's policies and actions.
Yes.
And she mentions these, but she did nothing to prevent them. She did nothing to stop him, which really is the function of the chief of staff.
Precisely.
She should be the reality check.
Yeah.
And instead, she states these things, and then she goes on to help him do it anyway. So, as you point out, she's not a chief of staff. She's an enabler of a lunatic in a room of sycophants who she got photographed with. I mean, there's nobody in his inner circle, and certainly not her, who are going to stop him from doing anything.
Yes.
They're going to stand by and cheer him on, as they did in their reviews of the speech that he gave a few days ago. It was interesting that on the media covering the response of the members of the administration, they were talking about what a wonderful speech it was, and they were telling Trump what a wonderful job he did. And we can talk about that speech later.
But the question is, why? Why did the president stand up and yell at America for 20 minutes?
Well, one of the things that was overheard by multiple members of the media at the end of the speech was Trump saying that Susie insisted he give the speech. So I have the impression that this was designed as a distraction. She certainly wanted to change the narrative, which was dominating the news cycle, and so they put together a 20-minute speech. They seemed to float some balloons that possibly he was going to declare war on Venezuela to get the networks to carry it.
Yeah.
So it seems like just a typical performative act by the Trump administration, in this case instigated possibly by Susie Wiles. And Trump got up there and did his usual nonsense, like at a campaign rally, so it really didn't do anything to divert the attention of the media from what's going on, or the American public, whose reaction was
meh. Yeah, and I have to say that the press initially was framing it as, well, he's trying to distract from the potential release or failure to release the Epstein files the day after the speech. But what you're saying is they got that wrong.
They got everything wrong here. And if anything, they should have kept him out from in front of any cameras until some of this Susie Wiles stuff and the Epstein files thing blew over. There's nothing that's going to help him in the Epstein files, even if there isn't anything particularly incriminating in it. It's like he was present. I mean, he was present, and there's no way around that. So, yeah, he should just let that drop.
Well, the New York Times this week did a real job on him and Epstein, so maybe...
It was practically a day-by-day account.
It really was amazing, but the point is, there was no context for the speech. There was no... Now the President of the United States, nothing. So all of a sudden, he's just railing about all of his major accomplishments with no cohesion at all.
Interestingly, he mentioned Biden more than himself, which is itself, blame everything on Biden.
Trump said Trump inherited a failed country, that Biden had essentially destroyed the country, and he was brilliantly rebuilding it.
I don't know how much longer we can take this rebuilding.
No, especially when you look at the East Wing. Well, I wanted, if you don't mind, to return to my saga about what happens when bored billionaires buy the media. And today I wanted to take a look at Bari Weiss, who was put in charge of CBS News after it was acquired by David Ellison. And if our loyal listener missed my brilliant analysis of that takeover, it's in last week's. Let me talk a little bit about who she is. Ellie Quinlan Hochtaling. This is a name I wish I'd been born with. It's so important sounding. Writing in the October 16th, 2025 New Republic, said of Weiss's appointment, quote, Weiss's takeover at the network has been met with widespread criticism. The anti-woke, pro-Israel grifter was announced as the newsroom's newest chief earlier this month, despite lacking any experience as a news reporter, working in broadcast news, or running a major news operation.
Well, why would that be relevant anyway?
Of course. This is some indication of what her appointment portends for CBS News is that in October, Claudia Milne, the head of standards and practices at CBS, announced her resignation, didn't give a reason. So we have to parse the reason. Mm-hmm. And I think this is it. A month earlier, CBS announced a new position of Ombudsperson for the news. Kenneth Weinstein was named to this new position never before at CBS or any other major news outlet I know of as Ombudsperson. Now, who is he? He was the president and CEO of the conservative Hudson Institute, and as Ombudsperson, he will report directly to Paramount President Jeff Shell. His job will be to monitor and report bias and audience complaints. Now, when the FCC approved the Skydance merger with Paramount, one of the conditions was this ombudsperson, and you remember how dodgy that approval was.
Yeah.
It came after a payoff, $16 million for a lawsuit against CBS 60 Minutes for the way they edited a interview with Kamala Harris. So obviously this ombudsperson will create a chilled climate for reporters, for journalists, staff writers, editors, and it will lead to self-censorship because he's going to be reviewing complaints from anybody who wants to complain. He does have close connections with Trump. In 2020, he was nominated by Trump to be ambassador to Japan, but the nomination was never acted upon. Between 2017 and 2020, he was also chairman of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, which means that he was chairman of the Oversight Board for the U.S. Agency for Global Media, and that means the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe. It tells me something about him that he would even accept this position.
Well, active politicians who take positions of president or director of notorious right-wing research institutes, generally speaking, take those jobs because they can't get another one.
He couldn't even get ambassador to Japan. Bless his heart. Bari Weiss has been named to a brand new position, just like the ombudsperson position. She is editor-in-chief of CBS News. It was a position created in October after David Ellison of Paramount Skydance purchased her company, The Free Press. This was an online platform launched in 2021. It started out on Substack. It was the most financially successful subscription-driven publication on Substack. And she has also derived revenues from live events and other media partnerships. But this is not a news platform. The emphasis for her has always been on cultural and political criticism, media criticism and defense of Israel, and condemnation of anti-Semitism. The platform expanded into podcasts and a standalone website before it was purchased. She's never been a reporter or any kind of journalist. She was a staff editor and writer at the Wall Street Journal, where her role was in opinion journalism. At the New York Times, she was hired as an opinion staff editor and writer. She became a prominent critic of the New York Times for illiberalism on the left and news coverage driven by social media trends. She resigned in 2020, wrote a very long letter about it, alleging a hostile work environment and the demand for ideological conformity. Writing in the New York Times in July of 2020, Edmund Lee said Weiss was hired as an op-ed staff editor and writer in 2017, quote, as part of the paper's effort to broaden the ideological range of its opinion staff after President Trump's inauguration, close quote. Characteristically, her stance is polarizing in the sense of amplifying cultural war narratives. That's who's in charge now and who reports directly to the president of Paramount. And the other resignations or firings are also quite interesting. Now, after any kind of merger, Bill will tell us, you're going to have people fired.
Actually, in this particular case, a woman I know who was working at CBS on their online staff, which was her dream job.
Yeah.
When this took place, she resigned and has taken another job, which she actually hates, but she resigned from CBS for just this particular reason.
Excellent to hear. Sorry, she's in a job she doesn't like, but the firings have been of women and people of color. And the closing down of programming has all been what they call, woke coverage and what some people call DEI. And it's so bad that, in reference to your friend, some of the white employees in the same units as the people of color have been fired have been blind with outrage. Doesn't mean they've resigned, and there have been other firings of people who were working in prominent positions as presenters. And of course, there's been one or two resignations in those areas as well. So if we're looking at what it means to try to shape the news, this is the beginning, I would say. She also wants to have, because she says people are desperate for debates. She wants to have...
You mean the ones that were eliminated by the equal time clause in the Reagan administration?
Yeah, that one. She wants to bring on people who are influencers, not necessarily in any kind of mainstream way, but who are progressives and conservatives, to let them, chew on each other. And her first effort in this regard was when she had an interview session, not a debate, but an interview session with the wife of the assassinated Charlie Kirk. Exactly. Bill's banging his head against the microphone. And nobody watched this.
Of course not.
And not only didn't they watch it, but they couldn't get anybody to serve as an advertiser. And this is where I think the wet dreams of billionaires to become media owners and the marketplace inevitably meet. If they don't care that they lose money, and CBS certainly has been losing money, then they can make this their little playground, and nobody will pay attention to them.
Well, but this is American mainstream media we're talking about, the New York Times, CBS. If you wanted to characterize their ideology, it's middle-of-the-road extremism. I mean, woke? They barely express an opinion off the opinion page. And, when you look at these she hated the New York Times opinion page. Well, nobody reads the Wall Street Journal opinion page who already doesn't completely agree with it, despite the fact that most economists have to look at the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times to find out what's going on in the economy. So you have this weird thing where the reporting is excellent, the opinion page is lunacy at the same time. But, American media, mainstream media, is not right or left. It's dull.
Well, but that's not their claim. That's not their claim. I mean, by they.
Thank
sorry,
you.
enough
Thank
with
you
the
for
pronouns.
The pronoun.
I mean, the right wing and obviously Trump. Trump was asked after during his interview on 60 Minutes, why did he persist in attacking the media now that he's president? And he says, well, I want to discredit you all, because then if you say something about me that's bad, nobody will believe it. Well, the trick about propagandizing a major outlet like CBS is that once it's known that this is a weaponized political platform, it loses all credibility.
Yeah.
And so that's what I meant when I said a moment ago, and no one will pay any attention to it.
It'll be a boring echo chamber. And we already have an interesting, whacked-out right-wing echo chamber.
Yeah.
And we've got MS Now, which is a left-wing echo chamber. I watch it for the entertainment.
Me too.
Because they're saying the things that I want to hear. I don't take it as an accurate representation of reality, though sometimes it's close.
They do also have personalities that you don't mind learning more about, like Nicole Wallace. But I got to tell you.
They also have more than ninth grade educations, so it's,
Yes. Yes. Oh, and that reminds me.
that condemns them right from the start.
Before I turn away to you again for your next segment, I would like to correct an error. Yes, last time I said that and I know people must have noticed this and been appalled. I said that Virgil kicks the frozen head of Satan in Dis, in the last circle of hell. No. Dante kicks the head of a traitor. What they do with Satan, they don't say anything to Satan. They just crawl down his body, which is how you get out of hell. Now, I have said before, they must have had better drugs during the Renaissance than we do. Also, the silly historians who think surrealism started after World War I, they got nothing on these writers of the Renaissance period, and above all, Dante. And of course, Bruegel the Elder.
Great. It's amazing that we have a listener who actually is engaged by such discussions. But we do want to correct those errors.
Yeah.
As many of them as we can, since there's almost certainly many of them.
The other thing that was not a mistake was when I was talking about the decline in literacy rates in America, functional literacy rates. No, I really was right. We're talking about between 6th and 7th grade level for this huge lump in the middle. So I'll come back to that some other time. But I think you have more to say about the content of what Trump said in his speech, which I will hold my hand up to and say I did not watch it.
Well, Trump's 20-minute unhinged speech contained mostly lies. So economist Dean Baker described the entire event as unhinged from reality. And there are serious questions as to why Trump would give such a weird speech, but we already talked about that. So, but we do want to talk about what he said. And Daniel Dale of CNN did a wonderful fact-checking, noting that the number of false claims he gave during the primetime address was almost uncountable. So here are some of the assertions.
He was, by the way, marvelous. He had very little time, because people can see this clip.
Yeah.
He had very little time to respond to the question, well, you are a fact checker. And he tried to say it all in one breath, and his eyes started to kind of pop out of his head. And he finally stopped and said, there's more I could say, but we don't have enough time. He was really great.
I'm kind of feeling the same way here. So Trump claimed that inflation has stopped, and of course inflation hasn't stopped. Year-to-year inflation rate was at 3% on Wednesday for September. And in November, the rate released the morning of Trump's speech was 2.7. But that means the prices are rising less quickly than they were in September, not that inflation has ceased. He talked about inflation under Biden. He repeated his false claim that when I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years. And some would say in the history of our country, here's someone who has a problem with pronouns because some here means him. The year-over-year inflation rate in the last full month of the Biden administration was 2.9%. It was 3% in January 2025 when Trump came into office. It was 3% in September and 2.7% in November. So we don't know what Trump is talking about when he says some would say. But inflation is not the worst in decades or all time. It is true that the U.S. inflation rate hit about a 40% high during the Biden administration at 9.1, but that was nowhere near the all-time record of 23.7 set in 1920. And that occurred 2 years before Trump's inauguration, and by then the inflation rate had plummeted. So Biden did a great job at getting inflation down. The cumulative increase in prices from the beginning of the Biden administration to the end was not the worst in U.S. history. Actually, that would have been less than half than what happened under Carter. Then, with regard to prices, Trump noted that egg prices had gone down, and everything else is falling rapidly. That's a quote. That's not even true, even if he was talking about grocery prices. which are up this year. Grocery items have increased in price since he returned to office, and the most recent available figures from the CPI is showing they're up about 2.7%. Now, as I mentioned last time, one of the problems with the price index that the government uses to make policy is it excludes food and energy because they're volatile, but that's where the inflation is occurring, is in food. He claimed that prescription drug prices, that he cut drug prices as much as 400, 500, even 600%. Well, yeah, it's mathematically impossible.
Yeah.
If the president actually got companies to reduce all their prices to zero, that would be a 100% cut. So what do you fact check here? I think University of Pennsylvania should probably be pretty embarrassed by this.
Because?
They gave him a degree.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Gas prices, he said, is now under $2.50 a gallon in much of the country. And in some states, by the way, it hit $1.99 a gallon. This is crap. Okay. There are about 125 stations out of 150,000 where you can get it for $1.99 a gallon. None of them are where anybody lives, and they're generally at discount or specialty, places. Trump talked about investment. He repeated his false claim that there has been $18 trillion in investment in the U.S. during his second presidency. The figure is fiction. The White House's own website said the figure was $9.6 trillion, and that's nonsense as well. So let's move on to the lies about immigration and foreign policy. Trump says he's ended 8 wars, though starting one in Venezuela seems like moving in the opposite direction. Anyway, the list of wars he settled was between Egypt and Ethiopia, which wasn't at war. He prevented the war in Serbia and Kosovo, which no one suggested there was an impending war. There was the war between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, where he brokered a peace agreement that lasted several minutes. There was the armed conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, where fighting erupted again, despite a peace agreement brokered by Trump earlier. And then there's the list of conflicts like in Gaza, Israel, and Hamas. And Trump's 8 figure is obviously too big. The figure is closer to 0. With regard to migration, Trump repeated his false claim that 25 million immigrants entered the country under Biden. The House Republicans have estimated that the real amount during the Biden administration was 2.2 million. There's the silly things that he's been saying about, countries emptying their mental institutions and jails, but that's ridiculous. And there's no corroboration. So, let's see. Trump's other lies, that there's no tax on Social Security. We talked about that, I think, in our first podcast. That's nonsense.
Yes.
He argued that Biden got mentioned a lot, which tells you how important Biden actually was. But he argued that crime was at record levels and that Biden undermined law enforcement. Neither of those claims is true. Crime wasn't even close to an all-time high under Biden. Murder spiked nationally during COVID, but it went right back down. So the record is that the crime was not particularly high during the Biden. After disparaging the Affordable Care Act as the Unaffordable Care Act, he argued that it was created to make insurance companies rich. It was bad health care at too high of a cost. That may be true, but then why would you want steep increases in the premiums? He argued that that's what the Democrats wanted, but that's, of course, a lie since they shut down the government to try and keep those down.
Right.
They're trying now, with many Republicans, to extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. It is likely that a vote will take place in the House this week approving the extension of those, though there's very little likelihood that that would get through the Senate. A White House spokesperson claimed Thursday on the condition of anonymity that Trump's point was that Democrats just want to increase the amount of government money going to insurance companies, which allows them to increase their premiums wantonly and get rewarded for it. But what Trump actually said was that Democrats are pushing for steep premium increases, and that's not true. He also tells us that coal, beautiful coal, clean coal, is back. And it's true his efforts to revive U.S. coal production have been somewhat successful, but there's nothing clean about coal. It creates polluting emissions that harm humans and the environment, and even with technological improvements that can reduce the emission levels, it's still too dirty. So it's amazing that, first of all, a former president would figure so largely in a discussion of the accomplishments of another president, and those accomplishments turn out all to be fictional. So in a way, if you just take this and play it, it kind of affirms Biden's accomplishments rather than Trump's, which is weird. And this speech was in his campaign style. It wasn't done in the Oval Office where it usually would if they wanted to project some form of gravitas. And he sort of did his riff. One person said the best thing about it is he had a really nice suit. And it looked good with the red, white, and blue theme. Estimated that the suit cost many thousands of dollars, which tells you how interested that reporter was in the content of this speech.
Well, I did think that I didn't watch the speech, but I watched clips of him yelling at people, us. But in back of him on, a fake fireplace surround, they had all this beautiful gold ribbon and gold ornaments mixed in with a little bit of greenery. And I thought, that's really beautiful. And this clown is yelling lies at us. Again, the complete deafness to the season is kind of special for him. He's got to just yell at people. If the chief of staff said to him, you need to give this speech to counterbalance whatever blowback there might be to the articles in Vanity Fair. He said to her after the speech, how did I do? And she said, I told you to keep it to 20 minutes, and you hit 20 minutes right on the nose.
Well, that tells you everything about what she thought about
Exactly, right.
Given that she's the chief of staff, if she wanted this done, she should have had a really tight speech about policy that he presented in a serious manner. Now, I suspect he's not capable of doing that.
Precisely, and I think she knows that too. He can't stay on topic.
But how would this work to convince the American public that the ship was, even afloat, much less going where it's supposed to? She had to know this would be fact-checked in real time. Thank you for the benefits of AI, by the way.
Yeah.
She had to know that performance was going to be characterized as unpresidential, as like one of his campaign speeches, and the only group of people that could possibly appeal to would be the base that takes anything he says as gospel to begin with. And, this speech was gobbledygook. It was just misstatements of facts cobbled together. They must have given him 5 paragraphs about, talk about these things or something, because he couldn't come up with this crap off the top of his head.
Right after it, he said to the reporters, do you think this is easy to do? Meaning, aren't I such an amazing person that I can stand up and blather for 20 minutes? And the answer is, yeah, it's pretty easy to do.
Well, you can go to, rest homes all over the United States and find elderly people who can speak at great length on any number of topics,
yes,
about which they know a great deal. Generally, long-term memory is pretty good. And they would be more coherent.
Yeah, and maybe
they wouldn't be allowed to drive, but they would be more coherent. Fortunately, Donald Trump doesn't drive.
It's true. Also, he doesn't drink alcohol, so that's what made the comment about he's acting like an alcoholic by his chief of staff so fascinating. She's stuck back there with her daddy issues.
Yeah, there are many drugs he might be on. Alcohol wouldn't be one of them.
No.
Quaaludes wouldn't be one of them. Certainly steroids, I would guess.
Yeah.
Buckets of caffeine, because we know he's addicted to Coca-Cola.
Coke, yeah.
That's not a commercial advertisement. I would never drink Coca-Cola, but I would use it to clean the oil off my driveway.
And other colas are available.
Are there?
Pepsi.
Oh, other, yeah. Two companies that spend over $1 billion a year on advertising to reach who in the world who hasn't heard of those two products?
True, but the cost of advertising is deductible.
And of course, it keeps anyone else from ever introducing a cola.
Well, there you go. You got to keep your brand name in front of the people, I reckon. Well, I think we haven't exhausted the things we could talk about, but we're exhausted from talking about them.
The whole thing about Trump and his lying is that we're to the point it just makes you tired. It's like these poor guys who have to write articles on this and go through it, and I appreciate them doing it.
Yeah.
But it's like, they could just go, Trump told 300 lies in this 20-minute talk, and that's now in the Guinness Book of World Records. Just list the number of lies. The content's irrelevant because the audience that pays any attention to what he says wouldn't know anyway.
Yes, that's exactly right, because although I did read in the commentary on the speech, how people can just comment on YouTube.
Yeah.
You don't know who they are and you don't care, but one person wrote in and said, I've been to, I think this was on Colbert, I've been to 42 Trump rallies, and this is the first time I've ever seen him act panicked. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to take that, because he probably is maniacally interested. I mean, the commentator, the person in the audience, is maniacally fascinated by Trump and probably has studied his body language very carefully.
Yeah. There was another commentator of the same ilk who said, I voted for this guy 3 times. After this speech, I can't imagine that I would ever support him for anything. So he is losing part of his base just because, he's just such an utter failure.
Yeah.
And doesn't seem to realize it. Though his panic and admitting that the GOP would probably lose the House in the midterms is very telling that somebody, or at least, he manages to keep his finger on what's going through social media. So I think he can see that there's a problem.
Well, and somebody probably walked into his office and told him it was the last person he talked to. That seems to be how he forms his ideas.
But from what we've learned from his chief of staff, the last thing he hears from any audience is, yes, sir.
And how high?
Yes, Mr. President.
Well, I'll be returning to the Vanity Fair article and the coverage of the Vanity Fair article when we all meet again, which will be after the holidays, after the new year. But we want to wish our loyal listener very, very many happy returns of the season. And we hope it's a time of family and getting together and kind of reminding ourselves that you can still find things that are okay in this world if you just turn off the TV.
And don't read newspapers, magazines.
And get off social media. Yeah, this is our advice. Stick your head in the sand, you'll feel better. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye till next time.
Bye-bye, folks.